Little piece I wrote recently. Haven't put any lyrics to it yet. I literally have nothing to say today. Just I've shared enough about stuff and I don't have anything coming up, so I'm just gonna wait for you guys to come in and ask or talk about something. And if nobody says anything, we're just gonna sit here and look at each other. It's nice to just sit in quietness. Free bird. You're really dating yourself there, Chris. I get it. With my 24-year-old husband, I have to remind him or tell him about who Kurt Cobain was. So, Freebird goes way back before that, right? Or who John Lennon was. I have to tell him John Lennon was a great songwriter. And then he'll say things like, well, so is Miley Cyrus. And I'll say, yes, yes, Miley Cyrus. But John Lennon came before that and was a major influence. I do have something to share, but I don't know if I'm going to go into that. If I feel pulled into that, I'm just kind of waiting for you guys to say something, bring up a topic. I may not even post this. It's live, so I may not. If there's nothing that's said worthwhile or topics, I may not post it. But just want to sit here and see who showed up. See if you have anything to share or something going on with your practice. Or let's see. I was wondering if you could elaborate, speak more about why addictions patterns become more intense. That was a good question, and then it just faded away on me. Let me see if I can get that back. Oh, why addictions and patterns can become more intense after awakening. That's a good one. Do they become more intense or just are they more conscious? Like, for example, if you do, this is another one that I think you know how to do this one, the person who asked the question, the preoccupation inquiry, for example, with addictions all our lives, there's the preoccupation already happening on an unconscious level with addictions. So let's say your addiction is smoking. As you're walking up to get a cigarette or pull a cigarette, there's all sorts of things going on in the mind that says, I really, really want this. I have to have this, but maybe also I shouldn't have it. I need to stop. And then the deficiency stories that attach to it, like I'm a failure because I can't stop, or the traumas that are driving it, that keep driving you doing it, all unconscious, but yet still there. So then, as we access the awareness as our true nature and we start looking from there, then we start seeing these more, but they were always there. So it looks like it's happening more, but is it? Is it just more conscious? So there's that element. But there's also another thing that I see, which is when the awakening happens, it's almost like the ego can just fight for survival. It's just going to look for something. And one of the areas that it can pick up as an addiction It's just kind of fighting for survival. Like it's like you're taking everything away from me. There's nothing to hold on to, and then it comes back to hang on to something for an identity or something. To me, it's all part of the awakening process because as it comes up to fight for survival, then it's more in our awareness and we can see it. Just let these fights happen. I can't think of another reason that I've seen other than we make things more conscious. They were already there, but they're more conscious. And plus, in some cases, I think they do amp up or ramp up. I just remember a story of a lady. She was, this is a long time ago, she died. She had an awakening experience. We were in sessions. She had that awakening, and then she was diagnosed with cancer. And that brought up issues around death and survival. But yet she was processing that from awareness. So there was a lot of peace. But what came up sort of unconsciously was this gambling addiction that had never been there. So she found herself going to the casino over and over and over again. And she was asking me why. And I thought, well, maybe that's what it is. It's like Custer's last stand, or it's the ego's trying desperately to grab onto something. That's what I mean. From my own experience was the sex compulsion came up after the awakening. I've now shared that. Right after the awakening, there was a 3-year compulsion into BDSM and some other fetish-like behavior. And for me, it was partly that there was more awareness of, let's see, how do I say this? Why did that spark that? I got to really sit and look at this and speak authentically about it instead of just mumbling. Oh, I see. So the sex compulsion for me was, again, the drivers had been unconscious. So all my life I had believed on an unconscious level that I was unlovable or I deserved to be punished or the shame was there. The deficiency stories driving that kind of thing. What I think that the sex compulsion did is it brought up my drivers for me to see. It's like it was all part of the process of it's almost like my consciousness just went into sex compulsion or addiction as a way to just put it all on the table. Like, here's your compulsion, your new compulsion. And by the way, it's connected to all these drivers that you haven't really looked at in your pathless path to awakening. You just forgot all this stuff, like the bullying and how it affected you and the deep shame that you have. And so it's almost like conscious, not really doing this, but it's almost like conscious saying, okay, now you can't avoid it anymore. Here it is. It was a gift, though, in that way, because it allowed me to see those drivers. Just know that there's nothing wrong with you if this happens. If some pattern reemerges, think of it as an opportunity because before it was probably there or the potential for it was there, but you were not conscious to it. So if it's coming up, it's perfect. It's really perfect. I am so grateful for all those things that came up for me after awakening, which I won't go into again. They all helped in some ways, including the physical pain that I shared about. Enormous physical pain for 2 years at least ended up being a gift because then it brought the anger repression to the surface. So no matter the why, no matter what the reason is, they're gifts. That's the way I can see it. And people across the world, I've seen that with them too, is that these are all gifts. Oh, good. Serena's got a question. Yesterday I couldn't sleep. I couldn't bear my own conditioning. I'm smiling also. I didn't see the rest of that. I'm smiling also. But today I'm doing the inquiries you suggested yesterday. Went deep into deficiency and lack. And then she talks about being not supported. Just reading her message. There are results, but the most beautiful is that my mother just called me and I experienced feelings that I've never felt before. Interesting. Oh, you're talking to her without getting angry. There you go. It's those moments where you see the value of the work, isn't it? is just relating to your mother in a different way. It's priceless. I'm glad you noted that too, Serena, because what I often say is, how do you measure the absence of something? So if there was anger there in the past when talking to mom, if it's not there, that newfound freedom doesn't come up with bells and whistles. It doesn't announce itself like, oh, look at me, I'm free now. It's just the absence of something, the absence of that wounded feeling or that anger or that trigger. So we might not even pay attention to it because it's the absence of something. It's missing. But if you pay attention to it, you can see the value of the work, to see that these inquiries have direct results in our lives. Um, Alex writes, have you even talked about rumination? Alex, can you elaborate on that for me? Have you even talked about rumination and it triggering anger? I'm fascinated. Alec, can you explain that a little bit more? Exactly what you're asking. Rumination and how it triggers anger. If you could elaborate on that a little bit more, I'm going to look something up here. Rumination, a deep or considered thought about something, the action or process of thinking deeply about something, and how that can bring up anger. See, if I knew what you were thinking about, what is the deep thought or about something, then I could go and talk about inquiry and dive into specifics. But when we talk about like general topics like rumination leading to anger, it doesn't give me, it invites pontificating, generalizing. I'd rather talk about specifics. If you have anything, like I was thinking about this, ruminating on this, and then anger came up. Anything like that. Or maybe it's just thinking, period. Maybe you're just thinking leads you to anger. See, I don't know what it is. I've been playing. Yes, I did play. That's a song I wrote, but haven't written lyrics to it. Okay, here's Alex's. Thank you, Alex. Get this in my view here. Scenario pop into my head of people embracing me and mentally play out shouting at them. Oh, I wish bad things would happen to them. That's what's going on. Uh, People embracing you. Interesting. People embracing you and then you get angry at them. You can work with that. Give me a second here to make sure I understand it. I see. So if I can understand that, Alex, you're ruminating on people embracing you and you end up wanting to sort of shout at them, like anger is coming out. That's an example of how something is like in the it's the unconscious, like you just find yourself doing it. This ties into the earlier question because we want this programming to show up. We want to be able to see it. So in recognizing awareness, we're more likely to see the programming, especially with inquiry. But if you don't have that awareness, recognition, or inquiry, you might just keep getting angry when you ruminate on someone embracing you. So you have to get under that. You have to see the programming. So if you close your eyes, and anybody can apply this to anything where they know that there's some conditioning operating, but you can't see it, and it keeps creating some suffering. So now you want to see it in order to see that it's not you, like to pull it up, feel it, see it, let it dissolve into awareness. How do you get it up? Look at the image of you being embraced and just sit with that for a second. Just that image, that triggering image. And then start with like, what deficiency story does that bring up in me? Start there. Because it might be that a deficiency story is somehow triggered in that moment. There's going to be a belief, at least, operating in those moments, Alex, of something about what the embracing means or represents. See if you can tweak out the words of that program as you sit with that. What am I believing about myself or believing, period, during this embrace? What's the unspoken program there? Ask yourself and then come back to us, Alex, because I don't want to guess on what you would see here. But if you can tell us what you see by looking at that being embraced and even the image of you getting angry, but asking, okay, but what does it mean about me? What's the program there? What is the meaning of the story? Because it might not be obvious. See, because on the surface, it doesn't look like that maybe there is a program. It just looks like you're being embraced and you're getting angry. But there's a program underneath that. See if you can just find it first and come back to us, Alex. If you can, I'll try to take you deeper. Oh, embarrassing you. And okay. So it embarrasses you and humiliates you. Which part of it? See, this is why it's better to do inquiry one on one, live or on Zoom, because I can't pick up the story. Exactly. It's embarrassing you and humiliating you. What is? You getting angry at them or being embraced? That's important because if being embraced brings up humiliation or embarrassment, there might be a different program than if you're getting the embarrassment over your reaction to. So, which is it, if you could share with us? There's some soundtrack music for you, Alex, as you discern what that is. Be great if you'd share that. Otherwise, I'll just speculate for you and go into it. But I wanted to see if there's something specifically that you discovered there. Anyway, so I'm just going to have to guess. So, if you're looking at the image of being embraced and you getting angry, let's say that you're getting embarrassed or humiliated over being embraced. Is that what it is? So, look at the image. Let's assume that the program, see, here I am assuming, Alex, it's much better if you could tell me what you're believing, but let's assume that the story is, I don't know, it's like they're faking it. They don't really love me or something. Oh, here we go. A certain person talking about me, trying to put me on the spot. A person talking about me and putting me on the spot. See that person in your awareness that's doing that and just ask a simple question. What deficiency story does this bring up when they're talking about me and trying to put me on the spot? Bring it back to identity. So they're doing that. So what? What are you believing about yourself in that moment? What's the deficiency story, the core belief about yourself? Can you name that? Could be anything, but if you could name that, I can definitely take you into inquiry on that. Yeah. Let me know, Alex. What comes up when you ask, what deficiency story comes up for me when they're talking about me like that? You can't see through what you can't see, is my point. So if you can't see the program, you won't be able to see through something that you can't see. That's why I'm asking you, what do you see? What's the belief there? So that I don't have to guess at what it is. Okay, so I'll wait for Alex. But assuming that he can't name the deficiency story, he's imagining certain people talking about him. So you could also just, what is the belief that you have about them talking about you? So they're talking about you, so what? In other words, what is the belief? Oh, oh, so it's bringing up the story that I have to explain myself to people. Okay, so I can see how that would be stressful. Is it feeling like you always have to explain yourself to people? Reverse that. So look at the person who's talking about you. And just start there. I don't have to explain anything. And then watch. Watch what comes up in your conditioning and just watch it. Start with the thoughts. I don't have to explain anything. Watch each thought. Stay with each one at a time. Chances are you've just never seen this conditioning right here. You've never seen what makes up that viewpoint. Observe it. Stay with each thing. Let each thing arise and fall to awareness. You may want to turn the sound off, Alex, so that I don't interfere with what you're doing. But if I were to show other people how I would inquire into that is I don't have to explain myself as I'm looking at this person. Yes, I do, because they don't understand. Instead of trying to get them to understand, can you just be with that thought they don't understand? Just let it be in awareness. Feeling whatever feeling comes with it, that's there too. But seeing that the thought falls away and you remain as awareness. See if there's another one. But if it goes quiet, pull the person back up. I don't have to explain everything. It could be an image that comes up. Images have hidden meanings. If an image comes up, ask, what does the image mean about me? Observe the words. If words come up, just observe those. I don't have to explain anything. Keep watching. It is that simple. Keep watching, and at some point add in, what do I get out of believing that I have to explain everything? Our beliefs and our programs have a usefulness to them. They don't happen in a vacuum. So you've developed this belief or story because it serves some purpose for you that's unconscious. And not seeing that utility, the belief can just continue. So what do I get out of believing that I have to explain everything? Witness all that. That's your programming. It's right there for you to see from awareness. I don't mean to you or them. I mean to the other people who they're trying to gauge a reaction. If they, right, okay, these things, the thing pulls up and then I can't read the whole thing. Right. If they knew my problem, right. This is the whole thing about questioning this belief that um, trying to gauge a reaction. If they knew my problem, they would understand. Why is it inappropriate for them to tell them, right? There's beliefs in there. See that? Just like it's inappropriate. Challenge that within yourself. It's say this, it's totally appropriate for them to put me on the spot. That should bring up a reaction. But witness the reaction and just let it be there. It's totally appropriate for them to put me on the spot. Feel that? Probably some emotion with that too. Let that be there. Those are two different inquiries to get at this. I don't have to explain myself to anyone. Then you're going to feel that ego pull around the program. Like, yes, I do, but just witness it, let it be. And any of the other assumptions in your statements, like anything else that arises to the level of something that you believe that isn't really true or real, it's just you believe it, like it's inappropriate for them to put me on the spot. But in reality, the reality of life is that people put people on the spot all the time. That's the reality. Your conditioning says they shouldn't. I get that. You can challenge the conditioning. I want everyone to put me on the spot. Pull up a bunch of people that you know. I want them all to put me on the spot. That's going to bring up these emotions, these thoughts that are behind this conditioning. You're not going to find freedom by continuously trying to get other people not to do something. Like, don't put me on the spot or don't do this. That's where all the suffering is. But if you challenge your own belief systems and see them in this way, that can be a deeper shift. So there's some work here for you, Alex, just to look at this. The individual I hate is a pathological liar who other people don't like and understand my dislike. Right. That's the thing, because with this work, it's never about condoning someone else's behavior because the person could be lying a lot, right? So it's not about condoning, it's about looking at the conditioning of how it affects you. Again, I love being put on the spot. Challenge what you're believing instead of trying to fix the other person, which is exhausting and impossible, really. Take what it is you're believing and reverse that and watch and witness, because I think you're going to get a deeper clarity there that way. Yeah, I don't know what else is operating, but there may be other beliefs there, Alex. You have to find those and then reverse them. Let me see if I've answered everything. Yeah, the whole thing about someone else is a pathological liar. But the question is, why does it bother us so much? So, like, for example, if I have a nosy neighbor, inquiry is not going to make my neighbor not nosy. Inquiry on my stuff, my neighbor still might be nosy, but it's not bothering me as much because I've worked out the conditioning on my end. So maybe the belief is that people shouldn't be nosy. That's my suffering. Because in real life, people are nosy. People do meddle in other people's business. That's reality. My conditioning says they shouldn't. So people should be nosy. No, they shouldn't. Feel it. You're challenging your own conditioning rather than trying to change others. Whatever you believe is probably not reality. Whatever we believe is like something that tries to go against reality. Reality is that people meddle, people are nosy, people ask questions. Belief system says they shouldn't. Challenge the belief system. Nothing you can do about reality of how things show up. Oh, I see. Thank you, Alex. He's given me a lot of information. I'm not this, but comes from a desire for others to point out these flaws. I call these types of people noisy hypocrites. To point out your flaws. Is that what it is? A desire for others to point out their flaws, that you want to point out their flaws. Right. What do I get out of believing I want to point out their flaws? I must be getting something out of that. Can you witness that? What do I get out of believing I need to point out their flaws? Just watch that. I don't have to point out their flaws. You could say in reality, people are just doing what they're doing. Some of it may look like flaws. There's nothing you can do about that. But you can work with your conditioning right there about you needing to point out flaws. Because I bet that's stressful, constantly pointing out flaws for people. I don't need to point out their flaws. You can just see it, watching it come and go, and feel whatever you're feeling with that. Let all that stuff dissolve. Keep doing the inquiry around that and see how that changes how you're relating to people. If you just do it a few times, because this is a long standing habit, I assume, of conditioning, chances are there won't be that much shift in it. But if you really look at it, see what you're believing, see that it's not real, it's true, or true, it's just thoughts, data coming across awareness. Feel everything that comes across. That should shift you out of that. Oh, I see. Hypocrisy is something that trips Alex up. So, you could say in reality, there's hypocrisy everywhere, people doing conflicting things. There's nothing we can do with all that, but what we believe about hypocrisy, we can work with. What I'm believing about hypocrisy, how I'm suffering, that's something I can work with because it's on my side. I love hypocrisy. I love when people are hypocrites. That's like saying I love reality because in reality, if you look around, people do say things that are contradictory. That's this reality. So it's like saying I love reality. I love that people are hypocritical. It's like saying I love reality. If we say I don't like people who are hypocritical, it's like I don't like reality. I prefer my belief system. To be clear is just to say I love hypocrites. And then here comes the conditioning that fights against reality. All you have to do is witness and allow it. No analysis, just witness and allow. I get it because some of these things have triggered me in the past. People who hypocrisy. I mean, yeah, I can see how that would trigger people. But again, what I realized is I was never able to stop anybody from being a hypocrite in my entire life, no matter how much I stormed and ranted and got upset or ignored them or tried to punish them or tried to outsmart them or point out their flaws. It just kept going. So the key was to realize, oh, this is something on my end. My freedom is here for me to look at what's on my end. That's the only thing that I have domain over. That's why I keep pointing back to what you believe. But when you witness the hypocrisy of a bad person, you're a victim of I want other people. This is good. Sorry, it just keeps fading away, Alex. Pull it back. Because if you're a bad person, you're a victim of other persons. Oh, I see. This is pretty deep stuff for you. You're a victim of I want other people to stand alongside me to point out you're a victim of whatever belief system, right? There's I want other people to stand right. But that's what I'm saying. Whatever you believe, reverse that and see it. Once you start doing that, you just start suffering less immediately. I would just say stand as awareness and just see these as thoughts coming and going. But as I've said, the stand as awareness for a lot of people isn't a thorough enough pointer because these things are so hidden. So reversing that would bring it up. Whereas it wouldn't, all that might not come up if you're just resting as awareness. You see that? By reversing the belief, you'll see more. I don't know what else to say about that because KI is that simple. It's just reversing, standing as awareness, witnessing, going deeper into that, of course, but can't really do that unless I'm right in front of you, working with you. Here, I'm trying to find in my own experience where I can relate to Alex, where I've shared, during the time of my chronic pain situation, where I was working with some deep-seated traumas that hadn't been seen through. One was I don't trust people. It came right from my trauma when I was in sixth grade. The people that were closest to me, my best friends, bullied me. So it was like I can't trust people. I spent a lot of my life just hiding from people. But then when I was around people, the belief I don't trust them created suffering for me. And I could have easily said, well, they're not trustable. And I could point to evidence, just like you could about hypocrisy. We could do it all day long. I could say, see, he's not trustable and she's not trustable and they're not trustable. But at a certain point, I want to pull it on my side and look at my belief. I can trust people. No, I can't. Witness that. What do I get out of believing I can't trust people? Oh, this is how I stay safe. This is how I protect myself from untrustworthy people. So you can see that that was more freeing than anything else. Any trying to get people to be trustable, to live up to their word, to follow through on what they said they would do, all of that was suffering. Because the reality is that certain people aren't trustable. Like, that's just how reality is. But the belief system is that somehow I should be able to trust them. You see that? Fighting against reality. Question that belief system. For me, it was I can trust people. No, I can't. No, I can't. All the evidence and proof coming and going in awareness, dissolving. What do I get out of believing I'm trusting? I don't trust people. I stay safe. I protect myself. Dissolving. At a certain point, it takes it all away from you. Your fight against reality gets taken away as you go deeper into this. But you have to do the work to see it again. One of the takeaways is just being in awareness isn't going to show it all to you because it's conditioning right under the surface that has it's you'll see with the utility inquiry, Alex, that there's a usefulness behind these beliefs that you have. Like they have served a purpose for you. And they'll continue as long as they serve some purpose until you see the utilities behind it, like what you're getting out of it. They'll continue because they have a utility. They're useful. You follow me? Okay. Anybody else have anything? Oh, I see. Other people don't see the content of the situation, the context. And that's why you have to explain it. So they would assume my problem is a failure with me without the backstory. What about this? Rumi said, "Let your let your reputation be ruined." Because a lot of those are what we think about other people. Can you go to this place where it's like, I don't care whether they think that it's a failure on my part. It's fine that people think it's a failure on my part. No, I need to explain to them. I need to see that. If you can sit here and be okay with no matter what people think about you, can you imagine liberation going any deeper than that? Where there's just, and I can tell you that through the years, people have threatened my life. I was put on a hit list once as an attorney. I had a spiritual seeker come and track me down from like New York all the way to Illinois. He was just like a couple hours away from me. He was going to chop my head off and shit down my throat. So I've had plenty of practice through the years, including all the dadification, the mummification that has been put on me, like all sorts of projections. But if I sit here and constantly worry about what other people think, this wouldn't be free. So a lot of the inquiries that we're doing is just letting go of what other people think, what they think, their impression of us, not trying to control and manage that anymore. But how do you do that? You really can't. You, the ego, can't. And it's even going to be difficult from awareness because certain beliefs are hidden from us. Like you had to ask me, Alex, how do I get under this? If it was so obvious from just being in awareness, it should have just unraveled itself. But a lot of it isn't seen. See that? So you have to do reverse inquiry to pull it up for it to be seen. So an inquiry for that is, I don't care what other people think. You know how people say that, but you can tell they don't really mean it? Usually when people say that, it makes me think they don't actually believe it, that they're trying to overcompensate. Like, oh, I don't care what people think. But if you went into inquiry with them, you could see that they very much care what people think. So inquiry keeps us honest. Whereas the thinking ego mind will say a bunch of stuff that isn't really true because it wants to believe that or it whatever else, overcompensating. But when we go into inquiry, we can't lie to ourselves so much. So if you just said in a conversation to someone, I don't care what other people think, it's not enough to convince me because what's the motivation behind that? What are you trying to fool yourself? Is there something under that? When you go into inquiry and you say, and you actually look at people in your life, like don't just do inquiry in thin air because it would be easy to say, I don't care what people think because I'm not looking at people in my awareness right now. I'm looking at a wall or I'm just resting as awareness. I don't care what people think. Pull up people, the people that you would care about what they think. Then you're going to get to your trigger. I don't care what any of them think. Yes, I do. Blah, blah, blah. I don't say blah as a derogatory thing. I'm just saying, here it comes. Are you watching it from awareness? Because now this is more honest. You do care what people think. This is your conditioning. We're living our lives for other people to a great degree. A big part of the awakening is that we don't do that anymore. just not living and submitting to other people's demands and requests and opinions. And we're living authentically. I'm not concerned about that, but you have to do the work to see that. It's not necessarily just going to show up because you're resting as awareness. Hey, Dublin. That's nice to see where people are coming from. Appreciate that you're here. Um, I can't read your name, but thanks. Hello from Cape Town. It's so awesome. People all over the world just dropping in. There's not a lot of us here, but it goes to how universal our suffering is, isn't it? It doesn't matter where we live. We deal with some of the same conditioning, and that's why this work is really universal in that way. It's like a common language. Even though we speak different languages, different regions of the world, when it comes to our suffering, we get each other. We see what we're talking about. It totally transcends culture and regions. It's beautiful. Hello from Hungary, from England. Wow. Does anybody else have anything? Just if you've been listening to my videos that you want to talk about before I bore you with more music? Anybody else have anything before I go? I may pop back on depending on what I have scheduled this morning. What do you think about going to contact a parent? Keisha? I love your name, by the way, if that's your name. Is it Keisha? I've never seen that. What do you think about going no contact with a parent? Oh, boundaries. If that's what you're talking about, boundaries. Is that what you're talking about? Setting a boundary with a parent or anyone else? I don't know the dynamics of that relationship, and I would never give you advice about whether you talk to your parents or not, or you make no contact. But I do know that boundary setting is important because as we're working things out in our own consciousness, our own suffering, then we come back in, yes, boundaries. Then we come back in relationship with people who have been the source. These relationships have been the source of suffering for a long time. And especially if the person on the other end isn't doing any transformative work, they're rather stagnant. So, like, say you have parents who are kind of doing the same thing that they were doing when you were a kid, no growth, no transformation, but yet we still feel an obligation, right? The obligation of family and of all these relationships. And if you look at it, it's often more of a case of guilt or we're afraid to set a boundary. But sometimes we have to set a boundary for our own mental health and well-being. We do that, and learning how to leave people behind is perfectly good. Spiritual practice is leaving, but you don't have to leave people behind out of pure angst and pain. You can do a lot of work around people first. With this work, getting really clear. And so then when you're clear and you're not really being triggered in the same way about that person, you may find then that you still want to set a boundary. It's like, I just still don't want this person in my life. This is not what I want in my life. Then you may have to do some work on being able to set that boundary because that can be scary. But all these things can be addressed in inquiry. I don't know exactly where you're at, Keisha, with this because you've given me just a little bit of information. If you want to give me a little bit more, I can try to pull that out. Yes, boundaries. I don't know what you're feeling about that. Generally, I would say boundaries are good if that's what needs to happen, but I don't know any of the facts. Oh, your mother's a narcissist. There's a fact. Okay. Yeah, so that happens a lot. People will say my parents or my mom or my dad is a narcissist. And then you get on the spiritual path and you start recognizing some of these patterns and you just don't want that person in your life. What stops you, Keisha, from setting a boundary? If you know that you don't want your mother in your life, then what is it that stops you? Might be a next question. I can't give you advice on whether to set the boundary, but I could help you on any block you're having around that if you want to mention what that is. Yeah, because at this point, if you really feel your mother's a narcissist, I assume there's been a great source of suffering there in that relationship, and maybe it's time to say, hey, mom, I love you, but I can't. Um, you've been in no contact, so you've already set the boundary. Guilt. There's the rub. So she's saying that she already set the boundary, hasn't made contact for 5 years, still feeling guilty. Try this inquiry. I haven't done anything wrong. The point of that inquiry is not to affirm that belief or try to like pretend like you had no part in it, but it's actually to see and feel the guilt thoughts so that they're right now they're unconscious. Keisha, it's like you feel it, but you don't see it fully. You know that you feel guilty, but you can't see all the programming. So if you look at your parents in awareness and just say, I don't feel guilty about anything, stand as awareness and just watch. One thing at a time come up, no matter what the content, including any feeling. If there's any strong feeling there, you might want to come down and just be with that. But essentially, stay with the thoughts that say that you feel guilty, that you did something wrong. Because by watching those, you're going to be also with these feelings that have been there for a while but haven't been brought to the surface. So these thoughts and feelings, specifically that come up, have not been brought to the surface. Bring them to the surface this way. Witness them from awareness. Repeat. Likely, what it is just a story of guilt that you just didn't see. Like you knew you felt guilty, but you couldn't see it. So now you can see it. Stay with it. Repeat. There may be some deeper inquiry to do there. I don't know what the guilt is about. Like, there's no facts there for me. So, the simple starter inquiry is I don't feel any guilt. And again, it's not to try to be someone who's guilt free or it's not trying to affirm anything. It's just pulling stuff up to see it. I don't feel any guilt. Here's another one, Keisha. What do I get out of believing that I feel guilty about setting this boundary? These beliefs and stories almost always have some usefulness. Like my guilt actually serves a purpose. What is it doing for me? What does it give me? Ask and watch what comes up. I don't know what it would be, but just watch and see what comes up because these utilities that come up right here are probably one of the reasons why this feeling of guilt stays around because it's serving you in some way. It serves the ego. Yeah. What do I get out of feeling guilty? The other thing, Keisha, is the good old boomerang in this work is there's my parents that I set a boundary to or with. What does that reflect back about me, about who I am? If I've set a boundary with them and I'm not speaking to them, does that bring up a story, an identity, a deficiency story for me? Like, oh, I'm not a good daughter or something, or some deficiency story. Reverse it. So if it's I'm a bad daughter for setting a boundary, I'm a great daughter for setting a boundary. No, you're not. Here it comes, showing itself to you. There's at least three good ways to work with that. Bye, guys. I may be back. I have to go to the restroom.